Good morning, everyone. It's Mark Armstrong here, and it's Monday, the 20th of April 2020. I trust that you're well in these rather strange times, but in these strange times, isn't it good to spend time in God's Word? So I've got my cup of tea here, I've got my Bible open at Psalm 45, and perhaps you'd like to join with me as I read through these verses. My heart overflows with a pleasing theme. I address my verse to the King. My tongue is like the pen of a ready scribe. You are the most handsome of the sons of men. Grace is poured upon your lips. Therefore God has blessed you forever. Gird your sword on your thigh, O mighty one, in your splendour and majesty. In your majesty ride out victoriously for the cause of truth and meekness and righteousness. Let your right hand teach you awesome deeds. Your arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies, and peoples fall under you. We often think of Jesus as gentle, meek and mild. He was that, of course. I am gentle and lowly of heart, he reminds us in Matthew 11:29. And of course that invitation comes to us. But the Lord is also a conqueror. The psalmist said about him, guard your sword upon your thigh, O mighty one, with your glory and your majesty. And in your majesty ride prosperously because of truth, humility and righteousness. That doesn't sound like the meek and gentle carpenter from Nazareth. Have you ever considered Christ as a conqueror? So often we view Jesus only through the four Gospels, where we find him as a servant. We see him as a humble man, a servant of God ministering to people. But here we read about a conqueror with a sword who is riding in majesty. On the cross, Jesus completely defeated Satan. He also overcame the world. And he said to his disciples, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world, in John 16:33. And he certainly overcame the flesh. Christians are identified with his victory. We have been crucified in the flesh, as Paul reminded Galatians in 2:20. We have been raised to walk in the newness of life, as Paul reminded the Romans in 6:4. And Christ wants to give us victory today. But first, we must want victory. Some people would rather walk on the margins of the battlefield and be a walking victim instead of a marching victor. So we need to examine our hearts today and say, Lord, I want victory today. Secondly, we must yield ourselves to Christ. We don't fight for victory. We fight from victory. The simple secret of winning in the Christian life is to identify ourselves with Christ, trust him, and follow him. We have battles to fight, to be sure, and sometimes we might even stumble and fall. But keep in mind that Christ is riding in majesty. Why don't you ride along with him by faith? Jesus has conquered life, and we may stand with him in victory. But before we can, though, we must want victory, and we must yield ourselves to him. Are you a conqueror? By faith, identify with Christ and share his victory. Trust that God will bless you throughout the rest of the day.